Hey guys, tonight we wander back in time, slipping into the soft, sunlit mornings of ancient Greece, where the gentle rustle of olive trees brushes against your ears and the scent of dew-damp stone drifts lazily into your senses. You probably won't survive this if you expect roaring battles or dramatic conspiracies. This is Aristotle before breakfast, calmly orchestrating the start of his day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you want, post your location and local time down below. I'm curious where you're slowly drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge out of a simple chamber, the floor cool beneath your sandals, and notice the early sun spilling across the stone walls. It's quiet except for a distant donkey braying and the faint chatter of the city stirring awake. The smell of olive oil and crushed herbs lingers in the air, a gentle perfume that signals the start of something ordinary yet methodical. Aristotle, in his calm, measured way, begins each morning by arranging his scrolls and clay tablets, aligning them just so, as if even their tilt could influence the clarity of his thinking. Historians still argue whether he truly believed in this precise arrangement affecting cognition, or if it was simply a soothing habit to prepare his mind. You can almost hear the faint scrape of his stylus against a wax tablet, a hypnotic rhythm that pulls you deeper into the slow unfolding of this day. The room feels lived in but uncluttered, every object with its intended purpose. A small jar of honey sits beside a modest bowl of figs, his breakfast laid out not for indulgence but as a kind of ritual that encourages reflection. You might find it peculiar that he measures the temperature of water and the consistency of bread crumbs, noting minutiae that could easily escape a less attentive observer. And yet, watching him, it's almost comforting. There's an intimacy in these small, deliberate motions, a reminder that even the greatest minds start with the mundane. He lifts a fig, examines its wrinkles, and you almost expect him to whisper a gentle question about its structure or taste. Even the way he dresses follows this quiet cadence. Tunics carefully folded, sandals adjusted so the straps cross just right over the instep. There's a sense of preparation here, a slow choreography of actions designed to align mind and body for the day ahead. Some scholars still debate whether Aristotle's obsession with order was merely practical or if it reflected an early philosophical understanding of the harmony between routine and thought. Either way, the rhythm is hypnotic. You notice the flicker of candlelight from last night still dancing across a corner, faint shadows stretching toward the walls, and you can almost feel the calm seeping into your own thoughts. As you settle into this gentle observation, a curious little lizard scurries across the floor, pausing mid-step to bask in a sunbeam. Aristotle might note its posture, the angle of its tail, perhaps even its eyes, cataloging tiny patterns in a way that seems both obsessive and oddly soothing. The repetition of these morning rituals, the arranging of scrolls, the tasting of honey, the observation of small creatures, creates a sense of safe predictability. You feel yourself slowing, your own breathing matching the deliberate motions in the room. 3 little jokes bubble in your mind as you watch. Imagine him arguing with a stubborn olive tree, or trying to convince the lizard to move its tail differently, or scribbling notes on the ideal sunbeam angle for maximum contemplation. All are quiet amusements that underscore the humanness of this routine. As you watch him finally pick up a small tablet to jot a few preliminary thoughts for the day, the world outside seems to fade slightly. You are immersed in Aristotle's unhurried orbit, where every tiny action matters and nothing is rushed. The faint aroma of figs and oil, the gentle scratching of stylus on wax, the soft morning light, all converge into a gentle cocoon of calm. And you realize that in these small, almost imperceptible details, the beginning of philosophy itself takes shape. Slow, patient, deliberate, each thought a seed waiting to bloom. You trudge toward the modest breakfast table, feeling the uneven stones beneath your feet and listening to the faint murmur of servants preparing the morning bread. The scent of honey mingles with toasted barley and a faint trace of olive oil, and you realize this meal is more than sustenance. It is the gentle prelude to a mind at work. Aristotle sits quietly, picking up a small piece of bread, tearing it methodically, and dipping it lightly into honey. There's a rhythm here, a slow cadence that seems designed to coax the mind awake without startling it. You notice the careful alignment of utensils and bowls, a deliberate symmetry that could make a mathematician blush, and you wonder if he believes harmony in the breakfast setup translates to clarity in thought. Historians still argue whether these minute rituals were meant to prime cognition or merely reflect the philosopher's fondness for order. As he chews slowly, he begins to contemplate small puzzles, ones that today might seem trivial but are treated with a curious seriousness. How many seeds are in a pomegranate? How might the different lengths of barley stalks influence the yield of a harvest? He jots numbers and observations in the margins of his notes, each mark precise, measured, almost hypnotic. You notice the way he tilts his head, eyes squinting slightly, as if each thought must be weighed like gold before it's committed to wax. You might imagine whispering a question about why he even bothers with such minute details, only to realize that he probably considers your question a thought experiment in itself. The slow rhythm of his chewing, scratching, and pondering has an oddly soothing quality, like a metronome guiding your own breathing. You reach out to pass him a small bowl of figs, watching him arrange them by size before eating. It's an endearing quirk, a sort of private amusement that breaks the monotony of breakfast without disrupting his careful order. Sometimes, a small quirk can illuminate a personality, and in this case, it's the gentle acknowledgement that even Aristotle needed minor distractions to prime his mind. He pauses to consider the shapes of the figs, the way sunlight catches on their wrinkles, and makes a note of the subtle differences. You catch yourself thinking about how strange and yet comforting it is that the world's greatest mind starts the day with such tender attention to the tiniest, most mundane details. A small bird flutters against the window, pecking softly at a crumb. Aristotle smiles faintly, perhaps noting its behavior, perhaps using it to illustrate a subtle philosophical point about observation, instinct, or attention. He murmurs something quietly, maybe a gentle joke about the bird's preferences, reminding you that philosophy does not always need to be grand or loud. Sometimes, it is gentle and domestic. You chuckle quietly at the thought of him arguing with a sparrow about ethics, imagining the tiny voice of reason in feathers and chirps. These minor amusements pepper his morning, forming a rhythm that is both practical and calming, establishing a pattern that seems almost hypnotic. Between bites, he revisits his small mental puzzles, lightly cross-referencing them with yesterday's observations, tracing lines of thought as if connecting stars in a tiny, domestic sky. The repetition is calming. You start to drift along with it, imagining the rhythm of honey, bread, and quiet contemplation as a gentle lullaby for the mind. Somewhere between the scraping of stylus and the soft scratching of the quill, the day begins in a space that feels timeless yet deliberate, and you realize that this ordinary, unhurried breakfast is the secret prelude to the extraordinary ideas yet to come. You step outside with Aristotle, the morning sun gently warming your shoulders as you follow him along the shaded courtyard of the Lyceum. The air is filled with a mixture of damp stone, crushed herbs, and the faint, distant hum of the waking city. You notice how slowly he walks, each step deliberate, as if pacing the world itself were a necessary part of thinking. The courtyard is lined with plants of all kinds, medicinal herbs, young olive trees, and creeping vines, and he pauses frequently, leaning close to inspect a leaf or sniff a blossom. Historians still argue whether these stops were purely observational or if Aristotle believed the sensory interaction with nature was essential to intellectual clarity. A small squirrel darts past your feet, startling you slightly, but Aristotle barely glances down. Instead, he scribbles a quick note on a wax tablet, noting the creature's path, tail flicks, and pauses, as if the smallest motion could reveal universal truths. You can't help but smile at the meticulous attention he pays to what seems trivial, yet somehow it feels soothing. Imagine a world where observing a squirrel's morning routine could be considered essential for philosophical training. You might chuckle quietly, and Aristotle would probably nod in solemn agreement, entirely unamused by your modern impatience. As you continue walking, he points out an oddly shaped stone, noting its texture, color, and how it might compare to similar stones in other parts of the Lyceum. His voice is soft, carrying a gentle lilt that makes even the most mundane description feel like a story unfolding in slow motion. You begin to notice patterns, the way sunlight dances on the leaves, the rhythmic chirping of birds, the soft swish of his sandals against the courtyard floor. Each observation is noted carefully, sometimes in shorthand on a tablet, sometimes murmured aloud, and occasionally with a faint, private chuckle at the quirks of nature itself. He stops to bend over a patch of small flowers, delicately brushing a petal with his fingers. You notice the faint scent of honey and pollen, the quiet rustle of leaves, and the distant sound of water trickling from a fountain. Here, in this slow, deliberate interaction with the world, there is a subtle lesson. Thought does not always need urgency. Contemplation thrives in patience. Aristotle sometimes pauses to watch insects crawl along stems, noting their movements with a precision that seems almost absurdly meticulous. You can imagine historians still debating whether these careful observations were scientific data collection, philosophical metaphor, or simply a way to savor morning calm. By the time the young students begin to appear, trailing along the paths behind him, the courtyard has taken on a gentle rhythm. Aristotle's footsteps, the soft scratching of his stylus against wax, the faint laughter of birds, and the quiet murmur of conversation blend into a slow symphony of thought and sensation. You feel your own mind sinking to this deliberate pace, the chaos of the modern world falling away as you walk alongside him. The sun climbs higher, casting long, dappled shadows, and the gentle cadence of his morning walk becomes almost hypnotic, a prelude to the quiet, immersive learning that will unfold in the hours ahead. You trail Aristotle as he settles beneath the dappled shade of an olive tree, the soft hum of leaves overhead blending with the distant calls of birds and the faint ripple of water from a nearby fountain. Here, he begins the process that he treats with a kind of meditative reverence, sorting his thoughts. You notice how he lays out his wax tablets and scrolls on the ground before him, arranging each in a careful order that seems at once rigid and fluid, like a dance of ideas frozen in a precise moment. Historians still argue whether this meticulous categorization was truly cognitive strategy or a comforting ritual, but you can't help but feel the slow, soothing rhythm of it. He lifts a tablet and examines yesterday's notes, the stylus tapping gently as he aligns one line with another, rewrites a phrase, and underlines a key term with deliberate care. Each mark is intentional, a quiet assertion that thought itself can be tamed, arranged, and revisited at leisure. You imagine him as both a gardener and a librarian, planting ideas in neat rows while cataloging them in labeled shelves of wax and papyrus. Oddly enough, he pauses to smile at a marginal doodle of a bird, reminding you that even the most disciplined mind allows space for small amusements. A soft breeze shifts the scrolls slightly, nudging a few from their careful alignment. Aristotle pauses, straightens them again, and murmurs something under his breath, perhaps a playful scolding of the wind. There's something hypnotically gentle about this insistence on order. It lulls you into a cadence where even the smallest disturbances are acknowledged, corrected, and accepted with calm patience. You start to notice the subtle textures of the scene. The rough stone under your fingertips, the smooth wax of the tablets, the faint perfume of crushed herbs drifting in the morning air. He picks up a particularly tattered scroll, brushing off a speck of dust, and begins comparing it with a more recent note. You can see the slow process of thought as it unfolds, a quiet dialogue between past observations and current reflections. There's a peculiar satisfaction in witnessing this. You can almost feel the edges of your own thoughts smoothing out, aligning, and becoming manageable under the gentle rhythm of his method. You might even chuckle at the idea of Aristotle debating ink stains, margins, and faint pencil scratches, imagining these minor irritations as monumental philosophical dilemmas. In this meditative sorting, he occasionally mutters soft observations aloud. The texture of a leaf, the curvature of a stone, the behavior of an ant climbing a twig. Each is noted carefully, as though every detail could reveal a universal truth if observed with patience. You realize the calming effect of such attention. The mind, exposed to this deliberate, slow pace, begins to echo its rhythm, synchronizing with Aristotle's unhurried process. The act of sorting ideas, once tedious in imagination, now feels like a gentle invitation to observe, to notice, and to rest within the measured unfolding of thought itself. You linger nearby as Aristotle shifts his attention from tablets and scrolls to the quieter, more intimate corners of his household. Here, his personal routines unfold in small, oddly charming ways. The careful pouring of olive oil into tiny dishes, the soft clink of ceramic as he arranges cups, and the mild fragrance of perfumes he favors for study sessions. Each motion is deliberate, a ritual that seems mundane at first but exudes a soothing rhythm when observed with patience. You notice how he times even minor chores with the same methodical attention he gives his philosophical notes. Historians still argue whether these habits were meant to sharpen the mind or simply provide comforting structure to his day. He pauses at a small shelf of oils, tilting a vial to catch the light, examining its color, viscosity, and faint aroma. You almost expect him to mutter a gentle aside about which oil best stimulates thought, and you're not disappointed. There's a humor in imagining Aristotle comparing oils like a modern barista comparing coffee beans, murmuring quietly about subtle differences only he could detect. You suppress a smile as he sniffs and nods, clearly satisfied with his morning selection. Small domestic rituals like this, combined with observation, create a rhythm that is hypnotic in its gentle ordinariness. Next, he attends to sweeping the floor with a soft bristled broom, moving with precision and care. You watch the slow arcs of his arm, the way dust shifts and settles, almost as if participating in a quiet dance. Even the choice of where to sweep first seems deliberate, a subtle choreography that contributes to the meditative atmosphere. Occasionally, he hums a barely audible tune, one you imagine could have accompanied his studies for years. The sensation is oddly soothing, and you catch yourself unconsciously matching your breathing to the cadence of his movements. A small bird hops onto the windowsill, pecking at crumbs left from breakfast. Aristotle pauses, observing its behavior with the same calm scrutiny he applies to his scrolls. He jots a note, perhaps a small insight into flight patterns or instinctive movements, without disrupting the flow of the day. You notice a faint smile at the corner of his mouth, a subtle acknowledgement that even minor household interactions can serve as mental exercises. Watching him, you feel a gentle pull into the slow orbit of his day, where attention to small details becomes a practice of mindfulness, quietly aligning thought and observation. Finally, he checks the alignment of chairs and cushions where students will later gather, straightening them with deliberate care. It's almost comical how meticulous he is about the placement, yet you can't deny the comfort this attention creates. The room feels more ordered, more peaceful, more ready to receive learning. You imagine that these small, domestic habits, oils, cleaning, positioning objects, are not just for aesthetic or practical purposes. They set a tone, a slow rhythm that prepares both mind and body for the gentle, immersive work ahead. His private eccentricities, once seemingly trivial, now feel like a soft, guiding hand on the shoulder of your consciousness, easing you into the serene pace of an ancient philosopher's morning. You notice Aristotle crouching beside a small cage of birds and a few tiny mammals that inhabit his courtyard, their soft rustling blending with the faint morning breeze. He leans closer, studying their movements, the tilt of a head, the twitch of an ear. There's an almost childlike fascination here, a quiet joy in observing the creature's routines without interference. Historians still argue whether Aristotle's careful study of animals was purely scientific or part of a broader ethical meditation on life itself. As you watch, you can feel the gentle rhythm of his observations seeping into your own thoughts, the hypnotic calm of someone who finds profound significance in the small, overlooked moments of daily life. He murmurs softly to himself, noting how a small rodent tests the edge of its cage before venturing further, or how a bird adjusts its feathers to catch sunlight. You imagine him comparing these tiny behaviors to human patterns, perhaps drawing metaphors that you will never fully hear but can sense in the slow cadence of his voice. Occasionally, he chuckles quietly, a sound that seems both private and contagious, and you can't help but smile at the subtle humor he finds in the lives of these small creatures. Watching him, the ordinary world, the rustle of leaves, the flutter of wings, the movement of tiny paws, feels alive in a gentle, almost hypnotic way. He reaches for a small wax tablet and scribbles notes, his stylus tapping lightly as he records observations. You notice the methodical way he classifies the animals by behavior, movement, and apparent thoughtfulness. Even the smallest gestures, a head tilt, a pause, a nibble, receive attention and are logged with quiet precision. You might chuckle at the idea that the world's most famous philosopher is meticulously categorizing a mouse's breakfast habits, but there's an undeniable beauty in the patience and care involved. This attention to detail creates a rhythm, a slow pulse that invites your own mind to unwind and settle into the gentle cadence of observation. A bird hops onto his shoulder briefly, and Aristotle responds with a soft, almost affectionate murmur. You notice how he never startles the creatures, instead adjusting his own movements to their pace, a subtle lesson in gentle observation and respect. It's a practice of attentiveness that doesn't demand drama or excitement, but quietly builds a tapestry of understanding over time. You feel the calm pull of this routine, the hypnotic effect of watching patience in motion, as he moves seamlessly between sketching, noting, and simply being present with the small lives around him. Finally, as he straightens and observes the entire collection, you realize that Aristotle's early lessons in philosophy are rooted not only in abstract thought but in the mindful appreciation of life's smallest details. Each animal, each motion, each soft sound contributes to a broader understanding, and the process is as much about cultivating serenity and focus as it is about knowledge. You feel a soothing lull in your mind as you absorb the careful attention and gentle humor he brings to these mundane observations, a slow and deliberate meditation on the world seen through patient, watchful eyes. You follow Aristotle as he turns his attention from animals to the broader garden, where rows of plants, herbs, and scattered minerals lie waiting for his careful gaze. Each leaf, each pebble, each flower becomes a potential lesson, a tiny detail to catalogue and understand. The air is rich with scents, sage, thyme, crushed earth, and you notice how he leans closer to examine the subtle textures, curling the tip of a leaf between his fingers or brushing dust from a stone with deliberate care. Historians still argue whether his meticulous cataloguing directly influenced modern science or if it was simply an exercise in disciplined attention, but there's no denying the hypnotic serenity of the process. He kneels beside a patch of lavender, tracing the delicate veins on each leaf, and murmurs quietly to himself. Perhaps his noting medicinal properties, perhaps his reflecting on symmetry in nature, or perhaps his simply enjoying the sensation of observing something fully, without rush or distraction. You begin to feel that same slow, immersive rhythm seep into your own consciousness, the measured inhale of his attention, the gentle exhale of observation. Occasionally, he plucks a tiny pebble or a dried leaf, placing it on a small scale or in a labeled container, moving as if each action were a soft, meditative note in a larger symphony of daily discovery. A small lizard pauses on a sunlit stone, its skin glinting faintly in the morning light. Aristotle bends, sketching its silhouette on a tablet with calm precision. You notice the tiny details he captures, the curvature of the tail, the delicate arrangement of its claws, the angle of its head. Even in this small act, there's a gentle playfulness, a faint humor that is entirely private, yet it pulses softly through the rhythm of his day. You might picture him debating with the lizard about movement patterns, or arguing silently over the elegance of its tail, and it's oddly comforting. He moves on to a small pile of minerals, arranging them according to shape, weight, and texture, noting subtleties that might escape a casual glance. You watch as he compares stones to leaves, drawing analogies only he fully comprehends, tracing invisible lines between plant structure and mineral form. It's a quiet, meticulous dance of thought, each movement slow and intentional, and you can't help but match your own breathing to the cadence of his work. A tiny gust of wind shifts some papers, and he carefully realigns them, muttering a gentle aside that might be a reprimand to the air itself. By mid-morning, the garden has become a soft sanctuary of study. Aristotle's slow pace, the careful alignment of objects, the occasional soft chuckle at the quirks of nature, all combine into a gentle meditation on observation. You find your mind easing into the rhythm, thoughts unwinding as each detail is noted and catalogued with unhurried precision. What might seem like tedious attention to ordinary things becomes a quiet lesson in mindfulness, patience, and the subtle joy of noticing the world fully, with care and curiosity. The ordinary becomes extraordinary simply through the lens of deliberate, calm observation, and you drift further into the serene cadence of Aristotle's day. You hear the soft shuffle of footsteps approaching as Aristotle's pupils begin to arrive, their youthful chatter blending gently with the hum of the morning. He greets them with quiet nods and a faint smile, inviting them to join in the slow, deliberate rhythm of learning he has established. There is no rush, no frantic energy. Each student finds a place along the courtyard paths or under the olive trees, settling in as if entering a sanctuary designed for contemplation. Historians still argue whether Aristotle's methods were truly pedagogical genius or simply a reflection of his meticulous temperament. But the effect on the mind is undeniable, calm, measured, and absorbing. The students open their tablets and scrolls, imitating his careful posture and soft movements. Aristotle moves among them slowly, observing, correcting gently, and occasionally whispering hints that guide their attention without startling or overwhelming. You notice the subtle humor in his corrections. A tilt of the head, a faint, wry smile, a soft quip about the shape of a letter or the curve of a line. There's a sense of ritual in every interaction, a gentle orchestration that encourages patience, observation, and quiet reflection. Even minor gestures, a softly tapped stylus, a small rearrangement of a scroll, carry a calming authority. As he pauses to explain a concept, you hear the careful cadence of his speech, measured and even, with inflections that rise and fall like gentle waves. It's a sound designed not to command, but to guide, creating an auditory rhythm that draws the mind inward. Occasionally, he will return to an earlier note, repeating it in a slightly different way, almost like a soft mantra. You start to feel your own thoughts slow in response, aligning with the hypnotic pace of instruction. Perhaps it's the repetition, or the quiet attention to detail, or the subtle humor threading through his words. Whatever it is, your mind begins to settle. A small bird lands on a nearby branch, and Aristotle pauses, integrating its brief presence into a lesson about observation, attention, and the natural world. The students watch in quiet fascination, noting how even a fleeting moment can reveal insights if approached slowly and attentively. You notice the same effect on yourself. The ordinary, once overlooked, gains significance when examined gently. The bird flits away, leaving behind only a soft rustle of leaves, but the calm lingers, like a faint echo of rhythm that keeps time with your own breathing. Throughout the morning, Aristotle circulates among his pupils, balancing instruction with observation, correction with encouragement, and subtle humor with patient guidance. Each movement, each interaction, is gentle and deliberate, a soft choreography that fosters concentration and calm. You feel drawn into the flow, experiencing what it must have been like to learn not in haste or pressure, but in a measured, mindful pace that allows ideas to settle, stretch, and bloom in their own time. By the time a light breeze stirs through the trees, you are fully immersed in the tranquil, hypnotic world of his classroom, where thought, observation, and gentle humor intertwine seamlessly. You notice Aristotle returning to a small corner of the courtyard, where he had placed some of the morning's puzzles and riddles. Breakfast riddles, as he calls them, simple questions designed to wake the mind gently without triggering stress or haste. He picks up a wax tablet and scans the symbols and marks, comparing them with his earlier notes. You can almost hear the soft scratch of stylus on wax, a rhythm so measured it lulls your own thoughts into a slow, steady cadence. Historians still argue whether these morning puzzles were intended as intellectual exercises or as meditative devices, but the effect is the same: calm, focused attention, a gentle stretching of the mind. You watch him lift a small pebble, rolling it in his fingers as he mulls over a problem. It could be a question about symmetry, a calculation, or a minor logical puzzle. The content hardly matters compared to the unhurried way he engages it. He occasionally murmurs to himself, noting a small discrepancy or laughing softly at the cleverness of a minor insight. You imagine him comparing solutions in his mind like a chess game played with invisible pieces, each move deliberate, measured, and quietly absorbing. You can almost feel your own thoughts slowing, mirroring the patient scrutiny he applies to each tiny problem. Sometimes he pauses, looking up at the sunlight filtering through olive leaves, tracing the shadows as they shift and stretch across the stone. He uses these quiet moments to revisit earlier notes, cross-referencing puzzles with observations of nature, small patterns in plant growth, or subtle behaviors of animals. You start to notice the rhythm: observation, note-taking, quiet reflection, repetition, and a soft acknowledgement of the day's minor discoveries. Each element flows into the next with hypnotic continuity, creating a sense of serene immersion. A student timidly approaches with a tentative answer, and Aristotle leans in, responding with a soft question or gentle correction rather than judgment. You notice how he turns even mistakes into opportunities for reflection, the soft murmur of dialogue blending into the ambient rhythm of the morning. It's as if every movement, every word, every pause is designed to reinforce patience and quiet engagement, rather than urgency or performance. You can feel the gentle pull of this methodical pace on your own mental state, like sinking into a slow, undisturbed current. By mid-morning, the combination of breakfast puzzles, nature observation, and careful reflection has created a sense of mental clarity. The air itself seems slower, each sound a note in an extended, calming symphony. You realize that the repetition of simple tasks, returning to puzzles, noting differences, observing details, is not just preparation for the day's philosophical work. It is a ritual, a deliberate shaping of thought into a slow, tranquil flow. You feel your mind stretching in response, each small insight reinforcing the serene, almost hypnotic rhythm of Aristotle's morning. You find yourself beside Aristotle as he pauses mid-morning, settling on a stone bench beneath a wide olive tree. The sunlight filters through the leaves in slow, golden patterns, casting gentle, moving mosaics across the tablets and scrolls arranged around him. He leans back slightly, eyes half closed, and begins the quiet practice of mental mapping. Thoughts, questions, and observations that have accumulated in the morning about plants, animals, minor puzzles, and student insights are now traced in invisible lines across the room, as if connecting points on an unseen constellation. Historians still argue whether these mental exercises were meant to cultivate ethical reasoning, enhance memory, or merely maintain his personal sense of order, but you notice how hypnotically calming the process is. His fingers hover lightly over the tablets as he arranges imagined connections, pausing to tap a small rhythm on a tablet or trace the edge of a scroll. You feel drawn into this careful choreography, your own thoughts slowing to match the deliberate pace of his reflections. Occasionally, he murmurs aloud, softly vocalizing potential links between observations. A pattern in a leaf here, a behavior in a bird there, a note from a pupil tucked in a corner. Each murmured association feels like a quiet nudge to notice, to pause, to see the world in measured, deliberate ways. You might smile at the image of a philosopher gently plotting lines of thought in the air, as if he were playing chess with invisible pieces, each move creating calm rather than tension. A slight breeze shifts the tablets, causing a soft rustle that punctuates his quiet reflections. He adjusts them gently, almost tenderly, muttering a private comment to the wind as if it had interrupted an intricate calculation. You watch, noticing how his attention to such minor disturbances reinforces a rhythm. Acknowledge, correct, and continue, a soft mantra of patience and presence. The air smells faintly of crushed herbs and sun-warmed stone, adding to the sensation that each breath you take is part of a carefully orchestrated morning symphony. Aristotle occasionally leans forward to jot a brief note, his stylus barely scratching the wax as he captures a fleeting thought. You notice how he repeats certain patterns of movement, adjusting scrolls, tapping lightly, tilting his head in consideration, muttering softly, and then returning to a prior observation. There is a gentle humor in this choreography, a faint, private amusement at the subtleties of his own mental maps, like a magician enjoying a trick only he fully understands. You feel the gentle pull of this rhythm in your own consciousness, a subtle invitation to slow down, notice, and let thoughts settle naturally. By the time he stretches and rises, you can almost see the invisible map of his morning thoughts etched across the courtyard, connecting observations and reflections in a quiet, ordered web. Each pause, each small gesture, each gentle scribble is part of a deliberate pacing that encourages both insight and calm. You realize that Aristotle's mid-morning mental mapping is less about producing immediate answers and more about cultivating a serene attentiveness, a way of being present with ideas without rushing or strain. The quiet, measured process invites you to align your own mind with its rhythm, to drift gently through thought, observation, and reflection as seamlessly as the light moves across the courtyard. You notice Aristotle retreating to a small table near the courtyard's edge, where a pile of correspondence waits patiently. Letters, scrolls, and small notes lie stacked neatly, each carefully folded or rolled, their order preserved with meticulous precision. He begins the slow process of reviewing them, opening one at a time, reading with measured attention, and jotting brief notes in the margins. Historians still debate whether his meticulous handling of correspondence was purely practical, a reflection of his disciplined temperament, or even an early form of information management. But for you, watching it is quietly hypnotic, a gentle dance of ink, paper, and thought. He lifts a letter and tilts it under the morning sun, examining the texture of the parchment, the faint impression of the seal, the neat strokes of someone else's hand. You almost expect him to comment softly on the quality of the handwriting, or the spacing between words, as if these were indicators of character. Occasionally, he scribbles a short response, taking his time to choose words carefully, pausing to consider the precise placement on the wax tablet or scroll. Even minor letters about mundane matters, a shipment of scrolls, a student inquiry, or a request for medicinal herbs, receive this deliberate, gentle attention. You watch a small quill tap softly on wax, moving slowly and rhythmically, marking responses with subtle flourishes that are almost playful. A faint smile occasionally touches his lips, hinting at private amusement. Perhaps he enjoys a clever turn of phrase, or perhaps he quietly mocks a minor error in the original letter. There's a soothing cadence to it, the combination of soft scratching, gentle exhalations, and measured movements lulling your thoughts into a steady, calm pattern. You imagine that these letters are less about communication and more about a meditation in miniature, each interaction a quiet rehearsal of patience, order, and attention. A slight draft nudges a loose scroll, and Aristotle adjusts it with the same careful, precise movements he applies to everything else. A gentle tap, a soft nudge, a private murmured comment that might be a reprimand for the wind itself. You notice the subtle humor and lightness in these minor gestures, reinforcing the hypnotic rhythm of his day. Observing him, you feel yourself unwinding, your mind matching his slow, deliberate pace, each small movement reinforcing the calm order of thought that permeates the morning. Finally, as he returns the correspondence to its neat stack, you sense a faint satisfaction in his posture. The letters read, responses noted, order restored. The quiet, meticulous care he has devoted to these minor communications is a gentle exercise in reflection, attention, and control over one's environment. You feel the calming effect, the subtle pull of rhythm, patience, and measured observation, as if the simple act of handling letters can align the mind and ease the restless thoughts of your own day. The soft warmth of the sun, the faint sense of herbs, and the subtle, repeated movements all converge into a serene, hypnotic tableau that prepares both student and observer for the next gentle stage of the day. Occasionally, he steps toward a young student, offering a quiet word of guidance, then retreats to his own corner, continuing his patient reflection. The cadence is mesmerizing. Observe, note, reflect, whisper a small joke, repeat. You can almost imagine historians attempting to map the flow of his thoughts like constellations, debating each line of reasoning, each gentle pause, and missing the subtle hypnotic effect that emerges from the rhythm itself. It is not urgency or drama that captivates, but the deliberate, unhurried unfolding of each thought, each movement, and each minor amusement. A breeze stirs, scattering a few papers, and Aristotle gently gathers them, muttering a soft aside, perhaps to the wind itself. You notice the quiet humor threading through his meticulous care, the precise alignment of thoughts mirrored in the precise alignment of papers. Observing him, you feel your own breathing settle into the same pattern, slow, measured, and quietly absorbing. The interplay of subtle gestures, whispered observations, and patient reflection draws your mind toward the same serenity. By late afternoon, Aristotle has moved seamlessly from observation to reflection, from student guidance to private amusement, maintaining a gentle, immersive rhythm. The cadence of his day, soft scratching, quiet murmurs, deliberate gestures, creates an almost hypnotic effect, where each detail of ordinary life becomes a gentle meditation. You notice how even minor acts, like adjusting a scroll or observing a leaf, participate in a larger, calming flow. The slow, deliberate pace of his reflection becomes a lullaby for the mind, inviting patience, gentle curiosity, and a sense of harmonious presence in the quiet world of the Lyceum. You follow Aristotle as the afternoon drifts into the soft glow of early evening, the courtyard now bathed in a mellow amber light. He moves with the same measured grace, collecting his tablets and scrolls, arranging them neatly for tomorrow. Historians still argue whether Aristotle's daily organization was practical discipline, philosophical ritual, or a combination of both, but watching it is quietly mesmerizing. Each motion, the gentle stacking of scrolls, the soft tap of a stylus, the careful folding of wax tablets, becomes part of the slow, hypnotic cadence that has guided you through the day. He pauses beneath a tall olive tree, tilting his head to watch shadows stretch across the stone paths. You notice the subtle rhythm in the way he observes, a small smile at the unexpected symmetry of a branch, a faint chuckle at a lizard's accidental leap. Even minor interactions, such as a student quietly asking a question, are met with calm, deliberate attention. You feel your mind sinking with this pace, thoughts unwinding gently as each action flows into the next. The soft interplay of light and shadow, the faint hum of insects, and the distant rustle of leaves all contribute to the immersive, serene atmosphere. Occasionally, Aristotle jots a final note, pausing to consider the day's observations and insights. His attention to detail, whether tracing a leaf's veins, recording a bird's flight, or noting the balance of shadows on a scroll, creates a tapestry of calm observation. You can almost feel the invisible connections forming between his observations, a quiet network of understanding that is both orderly and meditative. Small, private moments of amusement, a tilted scroll, a playful comment to the wind, thread through the day, softening the discipline with gentle humor. He moves toward the courtyard exit, collecting stray leaves and aligning tablets one last time. The students, now leaving for the evening, carry with them the calm, unhurried rhythm of the day, a sense of immersion that lingers long after the lessons conclude. You notice how even the simplest actions, tidying, adjusting, reflecting, can create a gentle, hypnotic effect when performed with care and attention. Your mind, now tuned to the deliberate cadence of Aristotle's movements, feels both rested and quietly stimulated, ready to drift into the lingering calm of evening. By the time you step back and watch him disappear into the softer shadows of the Lyceum, the courtyard retains the gentle imprint of a day steeped in slow observation, careful reflection, and subtle humor. You realize that the essence of this day is not merely in the accumulation of knowledge, but in the unhurried, immersive process itself. Each moment, observing, noting, reflecting, adjusting, has contributed to a serene mental rhythm that eases the mind into quiet awareness, preparing you for rest, reflection, and gentle dreaming. The courtyard, now still except for the whispering leaves, is a testament to the hypnotic power of patience, attention, and the soft, enduring charm of a philosopher's daily life. You step out into the night air, sandals crunching lightly against the packed dirt, and immediately you are aware of how still everything feels. The day's bustle has long faded, the marketplace is silent, and even the chickens have finally given up their gossip. Overhead, the sky is clear, a velvet stretch dotted with stars that look close enough to touch if only you could reach. Aristotle tilts his head back, robe falling loosely around him, and you find yourself imitating the gesture. There is something soothing about pretending you two have centuries of philosophy to lean on while staring at pinpricks of light that will outlive both of you. You imagine him murmuring, almost absent-mindedly, about the spheres, those crystalline, perfect shells carrying stars across the heavens. You try not to laugh when he insists that each star has its own soulful purpose, because to him this isn't quaint. This is as real as your phone buzzing on the nightstand. Historians still argue whether he truly believed in literal spheres, or if it was a tidy metaphor that his later followers took far too seriously. Either way, he gazes upward with the calm confidence of someone who is certain the universe has an order, even if you don't see it right now. The mainstream fact you probably know is that Aristotle categorized the heavens as a separate, unchanging realm, different from messy, decaying Earth. The quirky tidbit you may not know is that he thought comets were not celestial at all but just fiery exhalations belched up by the Earth, like indigestion. Yes, the cosmos, explained by ancient burps. You sigh, realizing how oddly comforting it is that even the greatest minds once shrugged at mysteries with the philosophical equivalent of, probably gas. As the crickets sing, you imagine the philosopher pointing out familiar patterns. Orion's belt, the Pleiades, and matching them with his carefully ordered notes. Each star, each cluster, another metaphor for how the mind organizes thought. You almost believe that staring into the night could untangle the knots in your own head. And just when your eyelids start to droop, he whispers something about the unmoved mover, the eternal prime cause of everything, and you think, cool, but I'm more moved by how soft this night air feels. 3 jokes down, and you're already drifting. The courtyard is quiet, but not entirely deserted. A shuffle of sandals approaches, and you realize a pair of Aristotle's students has arrived, clutching wax tablets like teenagers who stayed up too late cramming and now regret it. They bow, whisper apologies for intruding at this hour, and glance nervously at their teacher, who is clearly not the least bit surprised. You can tell he knew someone would show up. After all, when you build your entire reputation on explaining the universe, people tend to knock on your door at inconvenient times. He listens patiently, nodding, as the first student stammers out a question about ethics. You hear the words happiness and virtue, and you recognize this from the Nicomachean Ethics, his famous treatise where he basically invented the concept of the golden mean. Not too much, not too little, just right. Like porridge, but with morality. The mainstream fact, Aristotle argued that true happiness comes not from indulgence but from living a life of balanced virtue. The quirky tidbit, he thought that if you laughed too often, you were being vulgar. Too little, and you were a bore. Somewhere in the middle lies the sweet spot of Aristotelian comedy. Historians still argue whether he personally chuckled at a decent knock-knock joke or if he just preferred polite smirks. The second student asks about natural science. Why do leaves fall? Why does the wind shift? Aristotle gestures calmly, explaining in his familiar blend of observation and deduction. He leans on his favorite categories, the 4 causes: material, formal, efficient, and final. You're impressed he can run through them as easily as you rattle off Wi-Fi passwords. You picture him assigning cause of leaf drop as homework, which sounds almost as boring as filling out spreadsheets, but the way he speaks makes it sound gentle, even kind of cozy. There's a pause. The students glance at each other, half hoping their teacher will dismiss them, half hoping he'll go on forever. He smiles faintly, and instead of a grand lecture, he gives them a story about a farmer he once met who timed the planting of seeds by watching the swallows. You catch the sleepy humor in his voice. Wisdom doesn't always need diagrams, sometimes just a well-timed bird anecdote. Eventually, the young men bow again and retreat. Aristotle doesn't scold, doesn't boast. He just sits back, scratches his beard, and murmurs something about youth being both exhausting and invigorating. You chuckle, thinking, some things really haven't changed since 300 BCE. The student's gone, silence returns, thicker than before, and you feel it settle across the courtyard like a heavy blanket. Aristotle exhales, slow and deliberate, and you catch the way his gaze shifts from the night sky to the shadowed corners of the house. His thoughts, you realize, are drifting towards something far less observable than stars or plants: dreams. He has written before that dreams are not sent by the gods, nor do they predict the future, at least not in any reliable way. Instead, they are the echoes of daytime impressions, scrambled and replayed by the sleeping mind. The mainstream fact here, Aristotle is one of the first recorded thinkers to describe dreams as psychological phenomena, rather than divine telegrams. But then comes the quirky tidbit. He also speculated that because digestion affects dreams, overeating could make you imagine wild nonsense at night. Yes, your midnight pizza isn't just bad for your stomach. It's a gateway to surreal, Aristotelian dream theory. Historians still argue whether Aristotle believed dreams served a practical purpose, like sorting memories, or if he thought they were simply random static, the background hum of consciousness when the senses shut off. Either way, he takes them seriously enough to sit in the dim light and wonder what exactly your mind does while your body lies motionless. You feel the pull of his curiosity rubbing against your own fatigue. What if dreams are nature's rehearsal space? What if every nightmare you've ever had was just your brain stress-testing survival scenarios you'll never need? You half expect him to jot that down on a wax tablet, but instead he closes his eyes briefly, almost as if testing his own theory in real time. The crickets chirp louder, or maybe your own awareness fades in and out. You picture Aristotle telling you, sleep is the brother of death, but a kinder one. He would probably correct himself instantly. He didn't mean literal family ties, just the poetic kind. Still, you can't help thinking the metaphor works. Drifting off into the dark, not forever, just for the night. And right now, that sounds more appealing than any philosophical debate. The lamp is already burning low when Aristotle slips back inside. The air is warmer here, and the faint smell of oil smoke clings to the rafters. You watch him crouch by his writing desk, a modest wooden surface crowded with wax tablets, scraps of papyrus, and a stylus dulled from overuse. The light flickers, bending the shadows of his hand so it looks like there are two Aristotles. One real, one dancing ghost. He leans forward, carefully revising a note he scribbled earlier in the day. You catch fragments of his tidy Greek script: substance, essence, form. You might yawn at the words, but he treats them like gemstones that need polishing. The mainstream fact: Aristotle's method of working was famously systematic. He organized notes into categories, lists, and nested definitions, building frameworks that would influence everything from biology to politics. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some surviving notes suggest he wrote in shorthand, abbreviating in ways that still puzzle modern scholars. Tiny squiggles that may have been his own invented symbols. Historians still argue whether these notes were private musings or actual lecture drafts for his students, which makes reading them a little like snooping on someone's messy Google Docs. The oil lamp pops faintly, and for a moment he rubs his eyes. You can almost feel his weariness, the same kind you get when staring too long at a glowing screen. But instead of doom-scrolling, his doom-defining. He scratches out a phrase, then rewrites it slower, smoother. His entire body seems to relax once the words line up just right, as if order on the page restores order in the mind. You let yourself imagine him editing not just philosophy but daily life. Too much bread in the morning, delete. Add note, grapes are better. You smile, knowing he probably did keep small, mundane observations tucked between his grand theories. After all, who else would dedicate time to classifying mollusks and then pivot into ethics? The lamp guttering, Aristotle leans back, stretches, and whispers almost to himself about the satisfaction of clarity. You realize that even across centuries, that moment feels familiar. The quiet relief of fixing one clumsy sentence before bed. The night air calls again, and Aristotle steps back outside, this time with a slower pace, as though he wants to stretch out every remaining breath of the day. You follow him down the narrow stone path that winds through his small grove of trees. The leaves rustle in the faint breeze, cicadas buzz in steady rhythm, and the ground is still warm underfoot from the sun's long departure. It's the kind of atmosphere that convinces you even philosophy can relax once in a while. He walks with his hands clasped behind his back, head tilted slightly, not toward the heavens this time but toward the ground, where shadows of branches crisscross like a map. You notice how he murmurs observations. The oak resists bending, the olive twists gracefully. It's less about profound revelation now and more about simply naming what he sees. The mainstream fact: Aristotle spent years compiling detailed observations of plants and animals, effectively becoming one of the first natural scientists. But the quirky tidbit: he once claimed that bees had multiple stomachs, a mistake likely due to dissecting them hastily by lamplight. Historians still argue whether he personally did those dissections or if he relied on overeager assistants. Either way, the image of ancient scholars poking at bees while trying not to get stung adds a drowsy sort of comedy. The walk continues, slow, circular, repetitive, like pacing for the sake of pacing. You imagine his footsteps creating a soft metronome for your thoughts. Step, crunch. Step, crunch. He pauses only to point out a lizard scurrying across a wall, noting its tail, its quick movements, perhaps already categorizing it into his endless lists. For him, this isn't busy work, it's soothing, a way of tying even the smallest creatures into his sense of cosmic order. By the time he circles back, you feel like you've just taken a meditative loop yourself. The night is heavier now, the stars higher, and everything hums with a slow, deliberate calm. Back inside, the world shrinks down to the simplest of rituals. Aristotle doesn't need grand ceremonies to end the day. just small, repeatable gestures that carry him gently towards sleep. You watch him straighten the corner of his writing desk, aligning a tablet so its edge sits perfectly parallel with the wood grain. He adjusts a small clay cup, not because he needs to drink, but because order itself feels like closure. He hums softly under his breath, a tune without words. Maybe it's something he picked up from a marketplace musician years ago. Maybe it's entirely his own invention. Either way, it settles the silence, the way some people today put on white noise or a sleepy playlist. The mainstream fact: Aristotle believed music had the power to shape character, that different modes could stir courage or calm anxiety. The quirky tidbit: he warned that overly exciting melodies might make people unruly. Historians still argue whether he personally avoided rowdy tavern songs, or if he secretly enjoyed a bit of cheerful chaos before dinner. He moves on, tidying a cloak draped over a chair, rolling it neatly, setting it aside. His gestures are steady, economical, as though each one erases a trace of the day's busyness. You think of your own end-of-day habits, checking a lock twice, plugging in your phone, adjusting a pillow, and realize you're not that far removed from a philosopher in ancient Greece. Rituals, no matter how small, reassure the mind that tomorrow will arrive. At last he sits on the edge of his low bed, fingertips resting on his knees, eyes half closed. He whispers something inaudible, perhaps a prayer, perhaps just a thought left unfinished. The oil lamp gutters, shadows lengthen, and you feel the rhythm of the day release its final tension. Aristotle lies back, folds his arms across his chest, and lets the darkness take over. And you, following along, sense your own body craving that same surrender. The night closes in like a gentle curtain, each fold softening the world a little more. The oil lamp sputters once, twice, then fades, leaving only the faint silver wash of moonlight along the floor. Aristotle lies still, his day of observations and careful rituals complete, and you sense the weight of quiet settling over everything. You breathe in slowly, imagining the faint scent of olive trees drifting in through the open door. The cicadas outside sing their patient chorus, steady as a lullaby, and even the rustle of leaves feels as though it is leaning into silence. The world is not gone. It has simply grown hushed, like a friend lowering their voice so you can finally rest. All the ideas, the categories, the lists and debates, they scatter like dust motes in the dark, visible for a moment and then gone. What remains is not thought but calm, not questions but comfort. Your shoulders release a little tension you didn't know you carried. There is nothing to solve now. The day has already done its work. You are allowed, at last, to let the rhythm of sleep gather you, the way the philosopher allowed himself to drift into the unknown. And as you follow, the details blur into a single, quiet promise. You are safe, you are still, you are resting. Sweet dreams.